Welcome to Independent Sources. I'm Garry Pierre-Pierre. Preparations for the 2010 U.S. Census are well underway, and so are the potential problems. The constitutional mandate that the government count every person living in the U.S. every 10 years has been in effect since the first census in 1790. But 220 years later, there are major challenges. The U.S. population is more than 300 million. People have been displaced in the economic downturn. The country is more culturally diverse than ever. And there is suspicion in some communities about the confidentiality of census data. On this edition of Independent Sources, we focus on the facts and fears surrounding the 2010 census. We talk with a Pakistani journalist about a country on the verge of chaos. We discuss the rewards and risks ethnic journalists face when covering their communities. And we profile Russian Reklama. The newspaper's editor is sometimes at odds with his audience. All that and news of the week right after this.
Here is like the embassy. We fix a lot of problems for different people. During the Christmas time, here we'll give free toys to the kids. Just today, when I came in this morning, there were 2 or 3 different organizations waiting for a donation. We'll give it a donation.
Information collected for the census has an enormous impact on everyone living in the U.S. It's used to calculate everything from federal funding to congressional representation. Yet, there are still people reluctant to participate in the report. And a group of Latino ministers is calling on undocumented immigrants to boycott the census. To discuss these issues, I'm joined by Felicia Persaud, editor-in-chief, CaribWorldNews.com, and Angelo Falcón, president of the National Institute for Latino Policy. Welcome.
Thank you.
Angelo, in 1990, the census, it seems like everyone had a lawsuit against the census because of undercounting. In 2000, they seem to have gotten their act together. What's going on now as we march toward another census in 2010?
Well, there's a big irony, and that is because in the year 2000, we did that census, which was considered by everybody a very successful census, compared, as you said, to the 1990 census. The elements that made that successful now are in jeopardy. They were going to make it more technologically advanced, so they were going to be using handheld computers to do the count. That contract was mismanaged and was dropped, creating some cost overruns, and they're having to go back to the old paper and pencil routine. So that added cost to it and makes it more complicated. In 2000, one of the things they did is for the first time they paid for advertising. Before that, they used to get those 3 a.m. PSAs, on the census. So they said that doesn't work. They said to pay for it. This year, we're finding all sorts of problems with the paid advertising campaign in terms of how they're approaching it, and it's very late in the game. There's also a problem with the leadership. Right now, we just got the Department of Commerce, which oversees the whole census, just got their secretary confirmed. Sure. And also the director of the census is also waiting in the wings there. And it's almost, this thing is less than a year away, and the top leadership at the Census Bureau still isn't in place. So there are a lot of things that are going to make this a real challenge to make this 2010 census work. Things that I said already worked in the year 2000 now have been put in jeopardy for political reasons, for management problems, and right now it's a big, big job to get this thing rolling.
Felicia, I understand that this year the census are going to have just one form as opposed to in the past where you had the short form and the long form. How is that different? What are they doing now?
Well, they're hoping that would actually help people in terms of returning the forms, because it's less time to actually fill it out. And so that is what their whole argument has been based on, because when you look at a lot of the immigrant communities, especially in the Caribbean communities in Brooklyn and Southeast Queens and the Bronx, those areas are the most undercounted in the city because they're just not responding to the forms, and they're just they're not returning it. So they have like a lesser count than the overall city when you look at the averages.
And I understand that you are leading a campaign to get Caribbean people to write in their country of origin. Why?
Well, basically, I have to thank Angelo for actually putting me on that path, because when I thought of this whole idea and started the argument with the census, Angelo was the person that I went and sat with and who sort of walked me through the process and how long it's going to be, what you have to do. And so that is how Carib ID was formed. And basically, we're saying that Caribbean nationals are here. They're really a huge population of, you know, an immigrant group that's here. They're largely undercounted because there is no way to accurately self-identify on the form. And that is really what we want to change. So we just got a bill introduced to call for that. And, you know, I just want to stress that it's an ancestry category. So it's not an ethnic category. So there is not going to be a divide and rule in terms of what some
exactly,
arguments.
because when I first heard it, I was reminded of the old ways of looking at the Caribbean, where it was not really wise or politically correct to talk about your country of origin when you're Caribbean, because it would seem as divisive.
Yeah, and we're saying that people from the Caribbean are a lot of different ethnicities, a lot of different, I mean, our culture is Caribbean. That's what binds us together. People respond to that. It's different from a lot of other groups, whether you're African American born here or not. But there are people who identify themselves as black. We're not taking away from that. In fact, our argument is this will actually help to boost the black count, because more people would feel proud enough to say that they're Caribbean in ancestry, and ethnically they will be able to identify whatever ethnicities that they are, you know, as well.
Good point. Angelo, a group of Latino clergy is urging Latinos, immigrants, to boycott the census. How do you feel about that? Do you think it's a wise move?
Well, I don't think it's a wise move, but I see where the logic of where they're coming from. They're asking undocumented Latinos not to boycott the census. And they're encouraging documented, I guess, Latinos to participate. They see this as a way of putting leverage on the Obama administration to push for comprehensive immigration reform, which we all agree is a good thing. The question is, why did they pick the census, and why do they think the census is a point of leverage? It's not particularly clear to me, although right now they're raising concerns about the confidentiality issues. They're putting a lot of information out in the Latino community about why it's not safe to give information to the Census Bureau. On the other hand, many of us are basically trying to strengthen the confidentiality. So we, for example, have worked with the ACLU to see, for example, if the Patriot Act, for example, creates problems. And in their opinion, it doesn't. Their opinion, the laws that are there in place will protect the confidentiality of the information, will keep people from the Census Bureau sharing that information with other agencies.
But is that true, though? I mean, is that true? I know we say that over and over, but after the Patriot Act and other rules,
the record. That's why I went to the ACLU. If there's anybody who's going to be critical about the Patriot Act, is the ACLU, and now they got a Puerto Rican running the place. So I went, and that's why I went to them, exactly because of that cynicism that there is. And I think that the thing is that right now, of course, if there's some other major thing like 9/11, all bets are off, of course. But if that doesn't happen, there is all these protections there, and we also want to work with some of the legal defense funds and the organizations in our community to make sure that they back that up, and will sue the government if need be. But that's an issue that I think the ministers have brought up, and hopefully I'll be meeting with them to talk a little bit more about that. But it's something that a lot of people don't understand, why the census, when everybody is trying to mobilize to get our communities counted, what the logic is. And I quite frankly, I don't get all the logic behind it.
I wanted to say that we did invite people from the census to join the show, but they declined. So we're just going to have to move on without them on this show. Hopefully next show we're doing the census, they'll be here. But, Felicia, let's talk a little bit about the importance of being counted. Why is the census so important to this country?
Well, it determines every aspect of our lives, really, for the next 10 years, and that is really why. I mean, if you're talking about funding, especially undocumented immigrants, you're talking about immigration services, healthcare services for children, like the Health First. I mean, every aspect of our lives is determined by these dollars. So if our states are not getting the dollars based on their population, then somebody is going to suffer. And that is usually the people who are lowest down the rank. And the people who suffer most are largely immigrants who are in that huge population, you know. So that is really one of the major things. But the other thing is, when you look at the census, it determines redistricting for these political seats.
Let's talk. I want to talk to Angelo about that of redistricting. I know that northeastern states are likely to lose population or seats to the south. Now, where does New York State stand in all of this?
Well, New York could lose some seats, but the thing we don't know is upstate New York has been losing a lot of population. But New York, because of immigration, has been, in fact, holding its own, if not growing in population. So it's not clear ultimately what's going to happen, because when you make these calculations, you can't just look at one state. You have to look at all of them. And right now, what we would have is population estimates and projections to based on. But it is an important aspect of this thing. There's been some misinterpretation, though, of the role of the Census Bureau in redistricting. Census Bureau produces the numbers. It doesn't do the redistricting. Okay. And some people make it look like somehow the president's going to take over the Census Bureau and manipulate the numbers. That's not going to happen. That's very difficult to happen. But it is, I think, one of the most important things in terms of connecting to the political process and representation. At the same time, when the year 2000 census happened, I could say in the Latino community, it was amazing when all of a sudden they said that there were over 33 million Latinos in this country. All of a sudden, all sorts of people and institutions in this country started paying attention. Sure. And that was important.
One last point before we leave is the census, I said that they want to target the ethnic media as a partner. How is that going so far, Felicia?
Well, we really haven't seen any movements towards that in practicality yet. They're still having dialogue at this late stage of the game. They're still arguing over the artwork and the way the ethnic immigrant community is being portrayed in those artwork. And so I think the problem is that, you know, the ethnic press really has to step up its game. Immigrant organizations have to start raising their voices and realizing that this is, you know, we're playing with our future here and our children's future, and we have to make some serious noise about it to get recognized.
Unfortunately, that's all we have time for. But I'm sure we'll return to the census again in the coming months. Felicia Persaud of CaribWorldNews.com and Angelo Falcón of the National Institute for Latino Policy, thanks for being with us.
It was nice to be here.
Now, here's Adeola Oladele with some other news.
Thanks, Gary. Here's a look at some headlines from the ethnic media. The Jewish Forward reports that the new candidate for Israeli ambassador to Washington, Michael Oren, is often at odds with the peacemaking policies of the Obama administration. The Forward says that Oren has a more hardline approach to negotiations with Iran. Oren has not yet been credentialed. From the Filipino Reporter, Rolando Lavarro is the first Filipino-American to seek a Republican seat on New Jersey's Union Townships Council. Lavarro became the sole candidate after another Filipino-American was disqualified last week. From the Irish Voice, President Obama plans to cut tax benefits for U.S. companies based overseas. The Voice reports that this is a blow to the Irish economy, which has been enjoying a low corporation tax rate for many years. President Obama says this is in an effort to encourage U.S. companies to keep jobs at home. Merchants in Little Italy have raised thousands of dollars to aid the victims of an earthquake in L'Aquila. That from the Italian Tribune. The Merchant Association held a day-long drive with festive events raising tens of thousands of dollars to be sent to aid in the relief effort. From El Diario La Prensa, Mexican Americans are calling for justice in the murder of Luis Ramirez. The 25-year-old died last year after he was attacked by 6 young men. Many in the community believe the assault was a biased crime. The 2 men charged in the incident were given 1-year jail sentences. And finally, Caribbean Live reports that the Gun Buyback Initiative in Brooklyn is asking local churches to play their part to strengthen the program. Attorney Charles Hines hosted pastors from Brooklyn who are participating in the effort. So far, more than 1,000 guns have been collected, as the program continues to offer $200 for each gun returned. Those are just a few headlines from the ethnic media. Back to you, Garry.
Pakistan is a country plunging into chaos. The Pakistani government is trying to contain the Taliban and keep it from moving closer to the capital, Islamabad. Refugees continue to flood out of the Swat Valley, a region on the border with Afghanistan controlled by Taliban forces. Last week, the presidents of Pakistan and Afghanistan met with President Obama to talk about the deteriorating situations in both countries. Independent Sources special correspondent Karina Loffee sat down with Pakistani journalist Ayesha Haroon to talk about the turmoil in her country.
Hi, Ms. Haroon. Thank you so much for joining us on our show. Let's get right into it. President Zardari meeting with President Obama. What's the significance of this meeting?
It is very significant. There's a lot of pressure, as you know, from the U.S. and a lot of fear and apprehension here, that how the Taliban are advancing in Pakistan and how they are getting more and more space for themselves over there. And I think the U.S. government and a lot of people in Pakistan, of course, themselves want something to be done about that. And I think they'll be putting some pressure on that. As far as Mr. Zardari is concerned and the Pakistani government, I think they would be looking for some substantial aid coming soon because they have to go into a budget very soon. We have a budget in June and they have very little money to make a good budget out of. So it's going to be that kind of a dynamics there.
So you're saying that President Zardari is looking for financial assistance for aid from the U.S.?
Certainly he is. I mean, there is the Kerry Lugar bill that's coming through as well. But and the U.S. government has said and committed that they would be spending a lot of money, and not just on military issues, but also on the civilian structure of the country, which it really, really needs. The thing is, when will it come through? And I think that the government is hard-pressed for time right now. So they would be really pushing for it, that it should be done as soon as possible, because if they have the money, they can budget it for development areas or non-development areas, etc. So they would be pushing for that.
Okay, I wanted to ask you, in the last couple of days, we've seen an advancement of the Taliban forces closer and closer towards Islamabad. A lot of people have fled their homes. Why has it been so difficult to stop the Taliban from advancing?
It is a major political issue. It is. It's not very simple. They're not advancing towards Pakistan, towards Islamabad per se. They are in an area which is near Islamabad, and they are right now contained there. But what they are doing also is that going into adjoining areas and trying to force people over there to also believe in what they believe in. I think that is a very it's a very tricky situation. You have to deal with it militarily, you have to deal with it politically, and you have to also deal with it economically. There are lots and lots of unresolved issues in that area which have led to the situation today. And by just using the military aid or military means, by killing them or bombing them, etc., and not resolving the actual issues on ground, you won't really resolve much over there.
I just wanted to ask you, in the interest of time, a lot of people are wondering just how stable is Pakistan? Is the Pakistani government, can it handle this threat? Yes.
The Pakistani government can handle the threat. That is not the problem. Will it do it or not? That is the problem. The issue that when is it that you see that this is the time to act? The political resolve and the political will and the pressure from the West. How do you? These are all very controversial issues at times. But as far as handling the threat is concerned, they can handle it. That's not a problem.
Can you speak a bit about the division there that exists in the military, that there are some sympathizers of the Taliban, and how that makes it difficult to fight them?
It's difficult to say that they are sympathizers of the Taliban, but there are certainly people who resent fighting their own people. And also what we've seen is that in a lot of places in the northwest, in the Fatah region as well, a lot of times when action was taken, a lot of innocent people died. A lot of children died, a lot of women died, a lot of absolutely innocent men and women died. And that is very, very hard to come to terms with, that you've actually gone and killed your own people and for nothing. And I think that creates a lot of resentment. So it's not to say that they are sympathizers of Taliban and their ideology, but they're certainly not happy with going against fighting people who are actually their countrymen, and many of them are innocent.
Of course, and I think that's unfortunately all the time that we have. Ayesha Haroon, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks.
New America Media is the largest collective of ethnic media in the country. NAM, as it's called, is the brainchild of Sandy Close, a veteran journalist and recipient of a MacArthur Genius Award. Close recently sat down with producer Michelle García and reflected on the rewards and risks ethnic journalists face covering their own communities.
Ethnic media. It's a term used to describe everything from niche media to immigrant media. But to explain its essence, Sandy Close looks to history.
And ethnic media is this intermediary that exists, in the words of the pioneering black newspaper, Freedom Journal, we wish to plead our own cause, too long have others spoken for us.
It was the motto for the paper published in 1827 by freed slaves.
An extraordinary mission statement that uses that collective pronoun we in an era today that's consumed by eyes.
But there is a downside and challenges that come from a media that counts itself as part of a collective.
Of course, what happens with the collective sensibility is that you can be censored. Ethnic media are embedded in the communities they serve. That's their great strength. It also can be their limitation. They're advocates for, but dare they speak truth to their own community?
You become almost a self-censoring writer.
And it has been part of the mission of New America Media to serve their ethnic media members by creating a space where journalists can share the fears and frustrations they encounter from community reporting.
You write about Muslim, Sunni, Shia comes against you, and so on and so on.
One time, the Prime Minister and his wife were visiting here, and the Prime Minister's wife was very rude to people, and I observed that, and I made a comment, and that's all I did. I made one line comment, and I got death threats.
And Sandy Close says there are times when ethnic media becomes painfully aware that its internal discussions are available for all to see.
Asian Week ran the front page story, Why I Hate Blacks, producing a huge uproar. A young Asian neophyte journalist writes a column to get attention called Why I Hate Blacks, not realizing, of course, in the new global city we live in, there's no such thing as a siloed community.
Here in California, the owners of an Asian American newspaper in San Francisco say they're sorry for running a column.
We did a forum of ethnic media, not to demonize Asian Week, but to look at how we were all implicated in this use of stereotypes.
And it was at this forum that Chauncey Bailey, a prominent journalist in the black press and editor of the Oakland Post, uncorked a stunner.
We can handle hate in the black community. Let me say right here, no one hates black folks more than black folks.
Amen.
In August 2007, not long after this appearance, Bailey was shot, execution style, on the Oakland streets.
Later, police arrested Devondre Broussard, a 19-year-old handyman at Your Black Muslim Bakery.
Just last month, Broussard admitted killing Bailey because, quote, he was about to write an article. Bailey had been investigating the financial woes of the well-known Oakland business, Your Black Muslim Bakery, where Broussard worked.
Chauncey spoke truth to community even as he fulfilled a very strong role within the tradition of speaking for community, of speaking with community, of enhancing the community's voice.
For Independent Sources, I'm Michelle García.
New America Media holds its Ethnic Media Expo and Convention in Atlanta on June 4th and 5th. We'll be right back after this.
You promised me the world. Is this what you had in mind?
Help EarthShare and its members restore balance to the world. Visit earthshare.org and see what you can do. EarthShare, one environment, one simple way to care for it.
Michael Tripolsky is editor-in-chief of Russian Reklama, literally one of the largest newspapers serving New York's Russian community. Each weekly edition is about 400 pages. Tripolsky's liberal political views are sometimes contrary to those of his conservative readers, but the newspaper is still popular. I spoke with Tripolsky about the newspaper's success despite these differences. Russian Reklama's emergence as the largest newspaper parallels Little Odessa's growth. In the early 1990s, a massive migration of people from the old Soviet Union began to transform Brighton Beach from a deserted seaside Brooklyn neighborhood to a vibrant Russian enclave.
In the last years, here coming a lot of ethnic Russians, a lot of illegal immigrants here, and it's my main topics here in this paper. I cover these questions about illegal immigrants. I am a liberal journalist and I support immigrant reform. And these people respect us, respect our point, and a lot of illegal immigrants buy our newspaper.
Russian Reklama began modestly as a local shopper in 1993 and has ballooned to an amazing 400-page weekly with a mixture of sensational and serious news. And of course, it's chock full of ads. When it first hit newsstand, Russian Reklama was one of a handful of newspapers serving the new immigrants. Now, there are more than 25 newspapers and magazines serving the Russian community.
In my newspaper, they meet the friend, not the enemies, because in Russian community, attention to immigrant reform very negative. Many Russian Americans said that immigrant reform is bad for America, and these illegals have to go back to Russia, to Ukraine, to Moldavia, to Georgia. Our newspaper is another point, and it's attractive for these people.
Tripolsky prides himself as one of the few liberal voices drawn out in a chamber of deep conservatives' ideals. In their old country, these new New Yorkers immortalize Ronald Reagan for helping break down the steel curtain of communism.
People know I am liberal, but I can put Mr. O'Reilly articles today, and tomorrow some liberal writers from New York Times, of Nation, are equalized. It's our job. I tried to put, sometimes people say, Michael, why you publish articles as a Russian nationalist? I said, I have to do, because in general I put an article that you like, about Russian liberals in Moscow, opposition to Putin regime, but here live people who support Putin.
Russian Reklama may not be envied for its editorial content, but with almost 300 pages of paid advertising, it is the envy of most newspapers, ethnic or mainstream. Technology has helped Reklama with its business model. According to a competitor, the newspaper is designed in the Ukraine for a pittance and is sent back to New York electronically, where it is edited and printed. Now that Russian Reklama has gained economic footing, Tripolsky is looking for editorial respectability.
Majority read because advertise, look for job, for business, but I would like to increase this percent. Now about 20-25% said we read because interesting articles, not only advertise.
That's our show. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week. In the meantime, be independent-minded.